They say if your faith runs deep enough, you'll never fear doubt. But what happens when the very faith you built your whole life upon becomes the biggest question at the edge of death? What happens when, standing at the doorstep of eternity, you realize you never truly knew who was waiting on the other side? My name is Ethan Wells. I'm 62 years old. I used to be an Imam. I was once called the light of the community, a guide for the lost, the gatekeeper of belief. I thought I would die in that role, with my heart still loyal to what I believed was the truth. I thought if anyone were ever to meet God, it would surely be me. But then one day death came, truly came, not in some sacred light, not in the middle of prayer, I knew by heart, but in a complete and shattering collapse. And in that very collapse, I began to see that maybe I had never really known at all. I was born in the southern suburbs of Dearborn, Michigan, where the streets carry Arabic names and the bakeries fill the air with the warm scent of brown bread that smells like the memory of ancestors. I came to America in 1984 with my parents when I was just a teenager. My father was a strict but loving man. He told me that America was the land of opportunity, but also the place where it's easiest to lose your soul. I didn't understand what he meant back then, but I began to slowly as I grew up, caught between two worlds: on one side, freedom and modern life, on the other, tradition, rituals, and centuries-old faith. In our small, crowded apartment, we still rolled out the prayer rugs at dawn, and my mother would recite verses from the Quran as if she were speaking directly with the angels. I was a good student, quiet, observant, always listening more than I spoke. People used to say I had a face that made others feel at ease. At 19, I became the youth leader at our local Islamic center, guiding Quran classes at the community hall. Step by step, I became the one people turned to when they didn't know what to believe anymore. I wasn't a great speaker, but my faith was strong. I didn't rally crowds, but I tried to live right. I believed that if I kept my heart pure, God would walk with me. I believed that if I taught His words correctly, there would be no room for doubt. I believed in the Quran. I believed in the voice of my ancestors. I believed in the teachings passed down to me, in what we called the eternal moral law of the Almighty. My faith ran deep enough to make me think nothing could ever shake it. I got married at the age of 28 to Rebecca, a girl born and raised in Tennessee, who converted to Islam before marrying me. She did it for love, for faith, for something she once said was deeper than words could explain. My mother objected. My father stayed silent. But time, as it does, eventually settled everything. Rebecca learned quickly. She prayed as if she had been born to do it. We had 2 children, Alex and Sarah, both raised in a peaceful, faith-filled home. Fridays were for the mosque. I preached every week. I helped run Quran classes for teens. I visited the sick in hospitals. I served on the burial team for the dead. I was there for every wedding, every coming-of-age ceremony, every sacred moment in the life of our community. I lived that way for 30 years, like every breath was a prayer. I wasn't perfect, but I believed I was right. I never thought of death as something to fear, because I believed I was ready. I used to think that if there were a light waiting for me on the other side, it would call my name in a gentle voice. I used to imagine that I would meet Allah in a state of peace, like the calm that settles in when I lower my head for the final prostration of Friday night prayer. But I was wrong. And what frightened me most wasn't death itself, but the truth that I had no idea who was waiting for me on the other side. I only knew His name. I only knew the rituals. I only knew the prayers. I only knew how to live as if I truly knew. But I had never really asked myself if I did know. I had never asked that question until it was asked of me, not by a person, but by a voice unlike any I had ever heard. A voice that came from beyond the darkness, from the middle of a flat line, from outside the borders of every belief I had ever held. And if you think that's already a lot to take in, wait until you hear what happened next when my soul left my body, when I saw what no one had ever taught me I would see, when I came face to face with something I once believed could never be wrong. If you've ever wondered whether it's possible for someone who once believed with all their heart to still lose their way, then the next part is your answer. Have you ever spent your whole life inside a fortress of faith without knowing what its foundation was built on? Stay with me, because the next part is where the first cracks begin to show, and the truth begins to seep into a place I once thought could never be touched. I never believed in souls leaving the body. I never imagined an imam could tell a story like this and still keep his sanity, his dignity, or the respect of his community. But if I don't tell it, I'll lose my mind, because every night I still hear that voice. I still see that light. I still remember that feeling of both falling into a void and being lifted by something that doesn't belong to this world. It began on a Tuesday evening after an especially brutal round of chemotherapy. I remember coming home feeling like my soul had been drained from my body. Every step was a battle, every breath a silent prayer. I managed a few spoonfuls of the soup Rebecca made, then went to bed. I didn't fall asleep right away. I stared at the ceiling and thought about the days when I was strong, when I used to teach, when I used to visit the sick. Now I was the one who needed visiting, but I didn't want anyone to come. I didn't want them to see me like this. I didn't want pity. I wanted to die quietly, sitting upright like a man. But death didn't come the way I had imagined. I felt a tightness in my chest, like a heavy stone had been dropped on me. Then a loud ringing filled my head, like a silent storm crashing through my skull. Rebecca panicked and called 911. I barely had time to catch a glimpse of her eyes filled with tears before everything went black. I couldn't hear anything anymore. But then I heard something else. Not machines. Not voices. Not anything from this world. It was a silence so deep, it made you hear your thoughts. And in that silence, I found myself standing. I want to emphasize that, standing, looking down at my own body lying on a hospital bed, covered in tubes and wires, while doctors and nurses worked frantically to save me. But I wasn't part of them. I was outside of it all, like a stranger watching someone I used to know a long time ago. Then a light appeared. Not a blinding or surreal kind of light like you see in movies. It was a light that had weight, that had form. It felt like the wind you could see, like a calling not in words, but in instinct. I was drawn toward it as if my heart had known it long before I was ever born. I moved forward, or more accurately, I was being carried. I can't quite remember if my feet touched the ground, or if there was any ground at all. Everything was hazy, yet clearer than any reality I had ever known. I passed through what I think was a garden. There were trees, flowers, and an air so fresh it felt like the world had just been washed clean by rain. Everything was alive in a way that was different. I heard my daughter's laughter when she was a little girl. I felt my father's hand resting on my shoulder as I recited my first verse from the Quran. I saw my mother's face, younger than I'd ever remembered it, younger than even my memories allowed. It was as if memory and light had fused into one. But then everything changed suddenly without warning. The garden began to wither. Leaves turned to ash and fell like dust. Flowers crumbled into black powder in my hands. The air thickened until it was hard to breathe. I heard crying. I heard screaming. I heard someone calling my name in my native tongue, with a trembling voice like that of a mother watching her child being burned alive. I screamed, "Mother!" but no sound came out, and I couldn't see her. I could only hear her, like an echo rising from the belly of the earth. And then, I was pulled into darkness. A darkness with no direction, no shape, no end. And in that darkness, a voice spoke. A voice that didn't belong to any creature on this earth. "Yusef, now is the time for you to know the truth." I didn't answer because I couldn't. I didn't think I had a mouth anymore, or a tongue, or even a body. I was only aware. And fear. From a distance, I saw a massive throne, though it wasn't made of gold or stone, or anything I had ever seen before. It was a presence so immense that the very space around it seemed to bend beneath its authority. And on that throne sat a figure I thought might be the Prophet Muhammad, but he was bound in chains, his eyes filled with a sorrow so deep it felt as though the universe itself wanted to weep. I couldn't believe what I was seeing, but I couldn't look away. I wanted to ask if this was a dream, or a deception, or some cruel trick, but I no longer had a single thought clear enough to name anything. Then from the darkness, a great book fell, heavy as thunder when it struck the ground. The Quran, but not the one I had known. It didn't open by any human hand, but by some unseen force. Each page turned as if guided by a hand of judgment. And the voice spoke again. "Do you know who Allah is?" I said yes. I believed I did. But the voice didn't need my answer, it already knew. It asked again, "If Allah is the Creator, have you ever asked where He came from? Have you ever asked what your faith is truly built upon? What was before Islam? What came before the Quran? Have you ever dared to look back?" Suddenly I saw strange images, foreign yet somehow familiar. The Kaaba, before Islam, was surrounded by idols, with people kneeling before stone and wood. And the voice said again, this was the dwelling place of gods before they were called by other names. Then I saw a giant statue named Baal, and beneath it, strange writing that resembled ancient Arabic. It spelled out the word El. I didn't know why I was trembling. I didn't want to keep looking, but I couldn't close my eyes. I saw the letters Biel Allah, and I understood what the voice was hinting at. that the name I had always called upon might have origins far older than I had ever imagined. Perhaps the foundation of my faith was not where I thought it had begun. That perhaps I didn't know anything at all, and then everything vanished. I wasn't gently brought back. I was thrown back into my body like a child flung out of a dream, landing hard on a mattress soaked in sweat, surrounded by beeping machines and doctors' hands pressing down on my chest. I came back to life, but I wasn't truly alive. I heard them say, "He's back, mister. Wells, you're back." But all I felt was shattered, like I had been broken into pieces, and every piece of me was asking a question I no longer dared to answer. I couldn't say I believed like I used to. I couldn't repeat the words I had once taught. All that remained was a single, haunting question that followed me from the light into the darkness, from life into death. If what I believed wasn't the whole truth, then what is? If a man who once taught others about heaven is the one who saw it decaying, if a man who once preached about truth is the first to hear it questioned from the other side, then what does that mean? The next part doesn't just recount the crisis that followed my near-death experience. It is where I began to face the one thing I had never dared to face myself. I woke up, but no one knew that the man who opened his eyes that day was no longer the same. I was no longer Imam Ethan, the one they once called the light of the community, the man who stood before hundreds preaching things I once believed were unshakable truths, the man who used to say that if your faith is strong, nothing can shake you. I wasn't him anymore. I still had his face, his voice, his eyes, but inside, I was a land that had been torn open. A desert after a storm, where every landmark had been blown away, and all that remained of faith were dry, broken branches scattered across the sand. I didn't tell anyone what I had seen, not because I was afraid of being mocked, but because I didn't know what to call it myself. Was it a dream? A hallucination? A deception? A vision? Or was it a direct blow to the deepest part of my soul, the part one once thought was the most sacred? Rebecca sat beside me day and night. She didn't ask much. She just looked at me with eyes I had never seen in her before, part fear, part compassion, part something that felt like watching someone she loved slowly become a stranger. I didn't blame her. I didn't even recognize myself. I sat for hours in that hospital room, staring out the window, watching the leaves fall one by one as if God himself was peeling away layers of my faith, piece by piece, slowly and painfully. I tried to read the Quran as a way back, as a desperate attempt to rebuild the bridge I had lost. But every verse felt foreign, like I was reading a language I once knew but could no longer understand. I closed my eyes and recited Surah Yasin, something I used to know by heart, like breathing. But halfway through verse 11, I broke down in tears. Not because I was moved, but because I could no longer hear God in my voice. All I could hear was silence, heavy like stone. After being discharged from the hospital, I returned home in a weaker body, with a mind that felt heavier, and a soul that seemed to be floating. I didn't go back to the mosque. I used my health as an excuse. I let the community believe I was resting, recovering, taking time to heal. It was easier that way to protect the image, to avoid the confrontation. But the truth is, I was hiding from the trusting eyes of my students, hiding from the embraces of old men who once listened to my sermons, hiding from my reflection in the mirror. Every morning I woke up with the same question. If what I saw was real, then what was everything I had believed? If I was wrong, how many others had I led down the wrong path? How many words had I spoken as if they were truth, never realizing I was just repeating something passed down through centuries, with no one stopping to ask where it truly began? I started reading. I read like a dying man desperate for water, like someone cast out into the desert, clinging to a scrap of paper that might point the way. I read about the pre-Islamic history of Arabia, about the ancient gods of the peninsula, about the origins of the word El, and the religious rituals that existed before Muhammad was born. I read about Baal, the pantheons of Babylon, and the formation of the Abrahamic religions. I even read the Bible in English, something I had always avoided, convinced it had been altered. I read the works of scholars I used to label as heretics, godless men. I no longer cared about what was right or wrong in that moment. I only wanted to know. I didn't need comfort. I needed the truth, even if that truth shattered me completely. Rebecca watched me change a little more with each passing day. She no longer asked why I didn't pray anymore. She would simply leave a cup of hot tea on the table beside me and remain silent. But in that silence, I could hear her pain more clearly than any voice I had heard in my near-death experience. I saw her cry when she thought I was asleep. I saw her quietly take my father's old Quran down from the shelf and place it beside my pillow as if it were a reminder, or maybe an invisible embrace. But I couldn't open it the way I used to. Not because I hated it, but because I was afraid. Afraid of what I might see. Afraid I would find something hidden between the lines I once cherished. Afraid I would see a reflection of myself, distorted, unrecognizable, and unable to return to who I once was. I remember one night, I went out to the backyard, the same place I used to pray at dawn, when the ground was still cold and damp with dew. I looked up at the sky not to find God, but to ask one simple question. If you are truly the one I used to call upon, please let me know, even if I have to lose everything to understand it. I wasn't asking for a miracle. I wasn't asking for a vision. I just needed to know. If what I believed was false, then give me the courage to let it go. And if what I once rejected is true, then please, let me see it before it's too late. A week later, I met someone who, in my heart, felt like an answer to that prayer, Dr. Thompson. She was the oncologist managing my cancer treatment, a white woman in her 50s who always spoke gently, as if every word had been filtered through compassion. I never knew whether she had faith or not, until one day after a follow-up appointment, she looked at me for a long moment and said, "Ethan, I can see you're fighting more than just the illness. You're wrestling with something deeper. If you ever need someone to talk to, I'm here." I meant to decline, but somehow I nodded instead. And that's how we began to talk, not about religion at first, but about fear, about death, about the questions that haunt a person's sense of meaning. She told me she was raised in a Christian household, but had lost her faith at one point because of science, because of pain, because of what seemed senseless. But eventually, she found her way back. Not by rejecting reason, she said, but by using it to expand her faith. She told me something that stayed with me. Sometimes God doesn't ask you to believe blindly. He just asks that you be humble enough to ask sincerely. I had lived more than 60 years, never daring to ask that question, not because I wasn't allowed to, but because I believed that to ask was to doubt, and to doubt was a sin. But now I know there are questions that, if never asked, will leave the soul to wither forever. So I ask you, if there were a question strong enough to shake the foundations of your lifelong beliefs, would you dare to ask it? In the next part, I'll tell you what happened when I finally said out loud the one name I thought I would never speak. Not in defiance, but in truth. I don't know when it started, but at some point, the name Jesus stopped triggering instant rejection in me. It no longer made me frown as if I were hearing heresy. It no longer stirred up the old instincts of debate and resistance that marked my younger years. All I know is that the name began to echo within me like a melody familiar yet distant. Like a heartbeat that wasn't mine but didn't feel foreign. Like a call with no words, and yet my soul heard it. I didn't tell Rebecca. I didn't tell Dr. Thompson. I only told the night, the wind, and the silence that surrounded me, that a name had begun to take root in the scorched soil of my doubt. A name I had never been taught to love, but one I found myself unable to stop thinking about. And then one afternoon, I passed by the small prayer room on the 3rd floor of the hospital, a space where no one required you to believe to enter, where no one checked your faith at the door, where no one asked what you were searching for. I stepped in simply because I was tired. I needed a place without machines, without 4 tubes, without pitying glances. I sat down on a plain wooden chair and closed my eyes. I didn't pray the way I used to. I didn't recite anything by ritual. I just whispered a question softly, so softly I wasn't even sure if I'd spoken it out loud. If there's someone there, if you truly are the light I saw, if your name is Jesus, then please come. I wasn't asking for anything specific. I wasn't demanding proof. I didn't need a miracle. I just wanted to know you were real. Not through theology, not through doctrine, but through presence, through a gentle touch on the cracked and thirsty part of my soul. I wasn't expecting anything, but the moment I opened my eyes, I saw a man standing in the doorway. He wore a white buttoned-up shirt and held a small book in his hand. He smiled gently and said, "I'm Father John. I work here. I heard you had a near-death experience." I don't know why I didn't pull away. I don't know why I nodded. Maybe because he didn't come to the debate. He came like someone who had already walked through the place I was now standing in. I told him everything. No edits. No filters. No justifications. I told him about the light, about the decaying garden, about my mother's voice, about the throne and the chained prophet, about the holy book that opened in the dark, and about the question that kept pounding in my chest like a hammer. Do I truly know who he is? Do I truly believe in anything at all? He didn't interrupt. He didn't preach. He didn't look at me like I was lost. He simply asked gently, "Ethan, in that experience, did you see Jesus?" I shook my head. But then he opened his little book and read a line I had heard many times in old debates, words I had brushed off for years. But I had never heard them with my heart. Jesus said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." That verse rang through me like a long, deep bell, not because it was poetic, but because it was real. I don't know why I suddenly wanted to cry. All I know is that, for the first time in my life, it didn't feel like I was hearing from a character in a book. It felt like someone was there, speaking, present. In the days that followed, I began reading the Bible not to refute it like I used to, but just to listen. I didn't tell anyone. I read it in the bathroom. I read it while Rebecca slept. I read like a man in love who hasn't yet admitted it to himself. I found words about forgiveness, about unconditional love, about a kind of freedom that doesn't come from strict obedience but from returning home. I read about Jesus not as a prophet, but as someone who seemed to understand me better than I understood myself. I read the passage where he knelt among those ready to condemn the woman caught in adultery and said, "Let any one of you who is without sin cast the first stone." And I wept, because I knew I had thrown many stones. I had delivered many sermons. I had used faith like a weapon, not realizing I was breaking fragile souls in the process. I saw myself in the Pharisees. I saw myself in the shouting crowds. I saw myself in those who were so convinced of their righteousness, they had no room left for mercy. Rebecca started asking me what was going on. All I could say was, "I'm searching." I didn't want to lie to her, but I couldn't tell her the whole truth yet. Not because I was afraid she'd reject it, but because I wasn't ready to turn this story into belief. I was still afraid, still full of doubt, still hoping maybe this was just a phase, a crisis that would pass. But each time I opened the Bible, each time I prayed not with rituals, not with formulas, but with my own trembling words, I felt something. A closeness I couldn't name. A gentleness I had never found in any religious act I had ever performed. I remember one night, I went out to the backyard, the same place where I used to pray facing Mecca, where I once taught my son to bow deeply so that God could hear him. But that night, I didn't face the old direction. I simply looked up at the sky and said, "If Jesus is truly real, if he truly is the way, then please, let me take just one step. Just one first step. I won't ask for anything more." And I felt something. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was a warm light that passed through my chest, soft, steady, as if someone knew me to my core, and still loved me to my core. I didn't see Jesus appear. I didn't hear angels singing. I just knew. I wasn't afraid anymore. And that was the greatest miracle I had ever received. I had spent my whole life telling others which path to walk. But it was only when I dared to ask myself, honestly, that I realized I had never actually set foot on it. In the next part, I'll tell you what happened when I chose to take that first real step, even knowing it might cost me everything I had ever called safe. I knew there would come a day when everything would break open, and I wouldn't be able to hide it anymore. Not because I wanted to confess it, but because my eyes no longer looked like the man they used to know. Because my voice no longer carried the fire they remembered from the pulpit. Because I had stopped showing up for sermons. Because I stopped answering calls. I always found excuses not to attend community meetings. And then one day someone came to my house. An elder from the community. A man who had once placed his hand on my shoulder and said he was proud of me. The same man who had once brought his son to my Quran class and told him, "Listen to Teacher Ethan, he is closer to God than anyone I know." That day, he came and spoke softly, almost like a whisper. "Ethan, they're talking. They say you no longer believe. They say you're reading the Bible. They say you've abandoned the community." I didn't argue. I just looked at him and said, "I haven't abandoned anyone. I'm just searching for the truth." But he shook his head and said, "Sometimes, even searching can be a betrayal if it causes others to lose their way." I didn't argue back. I didn't have the strength to, because I knew he wasn't wrong. But I wasn't wrong either. And between those two truths stretched a deep, quiet valley. And that's where I was standing. Rebecca was the first to truly know that I was no longer where I once had been. I told her one evening as we sat on the old wooden bench out on the porch, with the sound of crickets in the background, the leaves rustling gently above us, and nothing left to hide. I told her I had seen the light. I had heard the call. I had felt love, and the name of that love was Jesus. I didn't speak with a preacher's voice, not with certainty, just with the trembling honesty of a man who knew he was about to lose everything. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She didn't walk away. She just sat in silence for a long time, then turned to me and said, "If that's true, then I hope it brings you back to life. Because I've been watching you die since the day you came home from the hospital." And then, I went to see Father John. I told him I believed. I told him I wanted to take a step. He asked me if I was ready to let go of everything. I said I didn't know, but I couldn't go back. He told me about baptism, not as a ritual, but as a declaration, that I had died to who I used to be, and was being born again into someone new. I didn't understand it all, but I knew I needed it like a dying man needs water, like someone lost needs a sign. I was baptized in a small room beside the chapel. There was no music, no crowd, just a basin of water, his hand on my shoulder, and a whisper, "You are a child of the light." And I wept. I didn't even know what I was crying for, relief, pain, fear, or maybe for the first time in my life, I felt like I belonged to something that didn't need me to prove anything. Didn't need me to be right, didn't need me to be perfect. After that, everything happened faster than I expected. My phone no longer rang with invitations to speak. Instead, it lit up with angry messages, accusations, scripture quotes telling me I had been deceived by Shaitan. I was asked to step down from the community leadership board. I was shunned, treated like a thorn that had sprouted in a field of pure faith. And I understood. I didn't blame them, because I had once been that person too. I had told young people not to read the Bible. I had said that if someone stepped out of line, they no longer belonged. I used to think that was defending the truth, but now I see it was fear of being questioned. Fear that if one person dared step beyond the boundary of belief, they might take others with them. So no, I'm not angry at them, because I remember standing in their place. And I'm not angry at myself either. I only feel compassion for the man I used to be, someone who believed with all his heart, but never dared to ask. Someone who lived righteously, but not necessarily deeply. Someone who loved God, but never truly knew the name of that love. I haven't lost my faith. I've just moved it from a wall to a path, from a law to a relationship, from fear to freedom. I no longer fear God's wrath. I no longer feel the need to strive endlessly for acceptance. I only know this. If He is truly the Father, as Jesus called Him, then He doesn't need me to be right. He just wants me to come home. Rebecca stayed, not because she instantly believed, but because she saw that I had truly come back to life. I no longer snapped in anger. I no longer carried guilt like armor. I no longer imposed my beliefs on others. I just lived as if each day were a silent sermon. And one evening, she said to me, "Maybe, I want to know more about Jesus. Not to convert, but to understand the one who changed you." I told her, "I don't want you to follow unless you've seen the light, because light cannot be forced. It can only be received." I started doing small things, sharing with those who used to ask me to pray for their children. They no longer came to the mosque, but some of them started showing up in my backyard. I told them, I'm no longer an imam. I no longer speak on anyone's behalf. I'm just a man who once died and was brought back. And if you're asking, then I'm willing to tell you. But I won't push. I won't debate. I'll simply share like a witness. And if they want to know more, I hand them the small book Father John gave me. The book I once feared to touch is now held in my hands like a mirror. If someone once called the light, had to walk through darkness to truly see, then maybe, even the darkness was part of the plan. In the next part, I'll tell you how I lived after everything that once defined me was gone, and what remained when everything else had faded away. I no longer stand at the pulpit. I no longer recite the words I memorized at 12. I no longer wear the role of a guide. All that remains is a name, a breath, and a story not meant to persuade, not meant to argue, not meant to claim what's right. A story simply meant to let someone out there know they're not crazy, not lost, and not alone. Because if someone like me can lose everything and still find their way back to themselves, then maybe you're closer to the truth than you think. I haven't done anything grand. I haven't started a movement. I haven't gone on television. I haven't debated scholars. I've simply stayed in the little garden behind my house, the same place where I once knelt facing Mecca, now the place where I lift my face and speak to the Father. The place where I once closed my eyes and repeated familiar prayers is now the place where I speak awkward, halting words from the depths of my heart. I don't need anyone to teach me how to call Him Father, because when a child truly comes home, it doesn't need a manual. It just needs to be received. My son Alex once asked me, "Dad, do you ever feel like you betrayed something that Grandpa believed in, the community, even yourself?" And I told him, I don't know. But I do know this. If I were to stay silent after my heart had awakened, that would be the real betrayal. I haven't betrayed tradition. I've simply dared to look it in the eye and ask if it's the truth, or just a shadow of something greater. And if what I found was love, then I believe your grandfather, if he were still here, would come to see that love doesn't divide. It doesn't belong to a nation. It doesn't speak just one language. It simply knows light and darkness. I started meeting people like me. Not all of them were former imams. Not all had gone through a near-death experience. No one had the same story, but all of them carried the same longing. A longing for something truer, deeper, more peaceful. They didn't come to me because I had answers. They came because I was willing not to have any. Because I was willing to say, I don't know. Because I was willing to admit that there were moments I cried because I could no longer hear God in the words I once believed were His. And yet, I heard Him again differently. Through the embrace of a wife I thought had lost her faith. Through a short verse of scripture spoken at just the right moment. Through a neighborhood boy who asked me why I always smiled, even though I was no longer a religious leader. I told him I smile because I no longer carry the burden of being right. I no longer live to get it all correct. I live to love, to listen, to be present. And if someone asks me whether I believe Jesus is real, I say I don't just believe. I know, because I died, and He called me back to life, not to become someone great, but to become someone real. I don't need anyone's approval. I don't need to be called a pastor or a convert. All I hope is that if someone somewhere is sitting awake in the middle of the night wondering if anyone has ever lost everything to find something no one else could see, they'll know I'm here. And I'll tell them this, no light ever comes too late. It's only that sometimes we're not ready to open our eyes. Whenever someone asks me, so who are you now? I don't say I'm religious. I don't say I'm a believer. I simply say, I'm someone who once died and was loved back to life. And if that's true, then it's enough. Enough to keep me walking, one step at a time, until I meet that light again. But this time, I'll know His name. Not just with my mind, but with every part of my soul. If you're still listening now, maybe something deep inside you is stirring too. Maybe you don't have the answers, just like I once didn't. But if you're brave enough to ask, then maybe you're also ready to see. And if you do see, don't keep it to yourself. Because light was made to shine where it's dark. And maybe you are that light. Someone out there is waiting for you. If something in this story made you pause for a moment, if even one part of it felt like I was telling your story, then don't walk away in silence. Leave a comment. It doesn't have to be long. It doesn't have to be eloquent. It just has to be real. A single feeling. An unanswered question. A name you haven't dared to say. A prayer you've kept hidden in your heart. Because maybe your words will become the light, or someone else is still trying to find their way in the dark. And if you believe the world needs more stories like this, not for entertainment, not to win an argument, but simply to remind us that something real still exists in a world slowly forgetting, then follow this channel. Not to make me famous, not to count the views, but so that every time you return, it's a quiet reminder to live honestly, to listen to that small voice within, to remember you are not alone. We're being called one by one. No one is forgotten. No one is left behind. And the journey is only just beginning.